Thank you. As we started at our initial training, we're going to start on time and end on time. Those things that we don't get to, we'll carry over to the next. We've got a long process in front of us. Everyone is deliberative about this, so I want to make sure we know we're going to end at 8 o'clock. So we're going to adjust this a little bit. Dr. Rosenbaum, and that's all right. It's been a long day. And Dr. Watson are going to talk about the COCL, and then we'll save 10 minutes for public comment because we're required to and there are many ways to communicate with us, but at least we need to have a place for public comment. There's also now websites, face pages, and those sorts of things. So we have 5 people signed up for public comment, 2 minutes apiece. That'll take 10 minutes. Okay? All right. Huh? 6. Oh, okay. It'll take 10 minutes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me
Go.
get started here. I'm not going to go through the whole role of the COCL with you because it's in the settlement. You've got a good sense of what that is, working with the COAB group to make this happen. And just a couple general comments about it. You know, it is the job to review the Portland Police Department for compliance with the settlement, okay, and to report back to you guys about that and get your input on that. So they need to develop and are in the business of developing state-of-the-art policies and procedures to guide police officers in the discretion that they need to use during critical incidents. And this is called administrative rulemaking for those of it. It's an important tool in reforming police organizations. But I think the bigger part, and we're working with DOJ and the COCL to review their policies and with you to see that they have all the right language in them, kind of like our discussion tonight about rules, but also our best state-of-the-art evidence-based practice. But really, it's about implementing a lot of these policies and procedures with high integrity, with high quality, so that we were going to monitor their compliance in that regard. And are they implementing state-of-the-art training, for example? Do they have the data systems built and in place that capture this critical information that allows us to identify cases that are problematic, but also monitor performance overall? Are the incidents being reported, the use of force reports, and how well? Are incidents being reviewed? And are out-of-policy incidents being investigated? And when that exists, is discipline being applied and appropriately? And so there's a whole process that the settlement puts in place that the COCL is going to be carefully looking at. And with your input, we'll be reporting back to you on a quarterly basis too, but also monthly basis when your meetings occur. So we don't want to bore you with any details about that tonight, and we're working on it. It's an iterative process. But I want to say that beyond implementation, there's the issue of impact. The settlement also refers to, do these changes make a difference? Does it really improve police-community relations? Do the number of incidents go down? And so we will be monitoring that both in the short term and the long term and reporting that back to you. How well are they doing? And if you look at the 20-plus prior settlements around the country over the last 20 years, you see that some of them made some major innovations in policing that stuck and that were helpful. But a lot of things in some departments didn't stick, and they just kind of evaporated over time. And so it's important to work on the institutionalization of change so that in 5 years it doesn't go away and things go back to the way they were. There is this kind of entropy that occurs in these processes. But anyway, the point is this process through community engagement and community oversight can help that institutionalization. And I think that we want to work with you on that as well. So on to the issue of where do we go from here, Amy? Are we on to, we're skipping over a lot of slides and stuff just so we can keep going, Tom. Let's see. Subcommittees. So Justice Timunas and the group felt that there has to be, use the word organized, coordinated. I like that. Effort. As you know, big committees are kind of dysfunctional sometimes, right? Because there's too many people and you can't get anything done. So breaking into subcommittees is really an effective way to get things done. We're going to propose 4 subcommittees. It's a lot, and we hope that you sign up for maybe even more than one. But will you go ahead, Amy, and explain what we plan, and then we want to leave time for comments.
Okay. Yeah, I'm passing a half sheet around for the members and the alternates to fill out, and I'll explain what it is.
Just take one.
We're proposing 4 subcommittees, and of course, over time, different subcommittees could be added, so it's not set in stone. But the first one would be the Mental Health Crisis Response Subcommittee, and that subcommittee would look more closely at reviewing changes in PPB policy and their training related to mental health crisis response, but also then looking at how we can assess the impact of these changes and make recommendations. So we would be meeting and talking about looking at changes, looking at the sources of information that are available, but also asking for feedback on what other sources of information and what other questions that we need to ask. And then this subcommittee would then report back to the COAB as a whole to kind of move it forward to make recommendations to PPB. Okay.
We'll go on to the second one.
The second committee is the Community Outreach Engagement Plan Committee, and this one will really look at PPB's Community Outreach and Engagement Plan and make recommendations and also help us work on ways of actually assessing how well that plan is working, how over time the community survey, which is a separate committee but will be working somewhat with this committee, how we're able to assess sort of changes in public perception and public experience with these community engagement and outreach activities.
Let me add something there. I wanted to add something to this. I think we have emphasized that out of all the things that we're doing, getting this community outreach and engagement plan right is hugely significant to what we're doing. So I have been in the process of identifying the, for lack of a better word, community police groups that exist in Portland. There are over 200. Yeah, there's over 200. Part of my job will be to contact those groups, to facilitate their comments and input to us in our public town hall meetings, because this is not about the PPB giving us their engagement plan. This is us as the community having a significant role to play in determining what kind of policing, what kind of community engagement is involved in this. So I want to encourage people to think about the community engagement piece. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm very enthusiastic that this is one of the keys to our success here. And just to give you just a little example of one of the things, the mayor, the chief, and I are going to appear at De La Salle North Catholic High School on Lombard off, I think is off MLK or Interstate, I can't remember which, at a youth forum on what we're doing. And so this is the kind of, then we as this subcommittee need to formulate and coalesce all the things that we're getting from the community as we collaborate with the PPB to put together this program. So I wanted to make sure you know we're not just getting their stuff.
Right.
We have to create and want to get our own, because I think that's crucial to this.
Okay.
When I read a little bit before this and, doing my research, that was something that you totally committed to, as well as Chief O'Day. That was what he said, and I've been hearing it's just like a lot of community engagement, which is very much important to the process of change in our system here in Portland, Oregon. So those are very, very important pieces to definitely be looking at.
So I'll be operating out of our office that's being established in the Rosewood Initiative. I have some administrative help right now. We don't have it permanent yet, but we'll be operating out of that. And Rebecca Allen is a third-year law student who, at Willamette, who's an extern to me, who will be working with our community engagement. And I'm going to keep Joanne Hardesty she's promised me with her list. So we're not just relying on a police list, but the community lists of where we go. So thank you, Amy. I just wanted to make that comment.
So then the next subcommittee is really, the committee will be looking at the police policies and data systems related to use of force. So what are the policy changes that have been made or in process? Is it being implemented the way it needs to be? What changes need to be made? But then also looking at whether the data systems to really track this information and use it are in place. So it's really focused related to the use of force and accountability systems within PPB. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you don't have to have any technical skills
Right.
to be on this. It may sound that way, but it's more about your, helping us think through the use of force measures.
So we can go through them and then come back and say, this is what they have, this is what we're finding, what questions do we need to ask, or where else do we need to look for data on this to vet the data?
Okay. And Tom on our team will be doing a lot of the work in the bowels of the police department, working with them to help construct and extract the data that we need. The Community Survey Committee, I want to talk about this because it ties in with what both Justice Muniz is saying, but this is part of the settlement, that there would be a community survey. We need to move quickly on this. As you may recall, the language says that by April of this year, given when it started, we need to have this in the field and being done. So we want to at least have it started in April. Monitor, implementation, interpret. We need the committee to help us put together the survey, to help us make sense of the results. Let me suggest several things. I would be willing to call ourselves an expert on this because we do lots of community surveys, okay, in many cities. I'm doing surveys in 55 cities right now. But we feel that as part of the work here in Portland, we need to team up with Portland State University. I've looked at their work carefully, and they are highly professional people, and it meets the standards of good research. And they've done some work previously on this. They've also used some of our questions that we've done in other cities, so I feel pretty good about it. But there's several things. The settlement talks about getting the community's perceptions and experiences with the police department's outreach and engagement strategies. So actually they're existing and then future. So it's partly, is there improvement in their outreach plan? And we need to get a baseline early on, and we've talked with the police about this, and of how the community feels about what the police department's been doing up to this point. And in addition to that, the settlement also really asks us to look at the impact of all this in the long run on the public's view of the police and legitimacy of the police, basically the public's trust and confidence in the police. And these surveys are uniquely designed to do that. We have measures of that in Portland already. We'd like to repeat some of those. But it's also a chance on this survey for us to get your input to add some new things. I think really we need to add more to this effort. And this is also a chance you can even have, one, you don't like a lot of open-ended questions because they're hard to analyze, but one that asks them about what recommendations they have, or that you guys were talking about various mechanisms for community input. This would be a broad sample of 1,000 people in Portland that randomly selected. In addition to that, we feel that the experiences people have had with the police with regard to use of force, not just that, but other things that matter. Most complaints to the city about police behavior in most cities are about language or being rude or inconsiderate. They're not always use of force, but use of force they're low levels of use of force. Use of force is defined here differently, but we can measure that as well among the community, but we'd want a more recent sample of people who have had contact with the police. The third possibility for a survey, too, that is, as Justice Muniz was pointing out, and you guys have pointed out, the need to expand your partnerships here. The COAB is just the central core of the heart, but you've got all these different parts of the community that need to be represented. So community organizations, a survey of them in particular would give you a different data set, and I think that's worth doing. And take that big list that you're all going to work from and that he's going to work from, and survey them up front, you know, about what they think and what needs to be done. So these are possibilities. If you want to be on this committee, you could help us think through that over the next. We need to get moving on that, though, in the next month. And we have a lot of suggested questions that have been validated through previous surveys, but it needs to be tailored and new questions need to be added. And I can help chair that committee and work with people on that. So. Yeah.
What I did pass around is that half sheet. If people could fill out kind of what committees they're willing to be on, what their preferences are for committees, so that way we can put together sort of a proposed, basically list of the members of the subcommittees, and then, you know, see what people think of that. Otherwise, we could be here for hours too, trying to put together the committees. So just as a way to get started on creating those, so we can, particularly the community survey one, really needs to hit the ground pretty quickly so that we can start bringing in information and getting feedback on it.
Assuming that people are not going to be able to fill this out tonight,
We can email.
we could create an electronic version, and it could be emailed out to everybody so you can respond electronically. And I think the best is respond to Amy Ruiz about this, and we'll get everything collected. And I think also there could be questions about these committees, so you can address them to the COCL, either directly to me or to Dr. Rosenbaum and Dr. Watson. Bud?
We should,
sorry.
yeah, and then there's a schedule we want to get to too before we, but go ahead.
Philip?
Yes, I'm sorry, this is Philip. I have a question real quick in regards to selection of subcommittees. Tell me, what would happen if we all chose one specific committee? Would we all be involved, or how would that be solved?
You give him the
Oh,
answer.
boy. That's
We
a
don't
tough one.
I think we'd have to come back here and say,
Well,
work on a project.
Anything's possible. I mean, we'll just feel lonely on the other committees. But I think that with that many people, let's just say more realistically that a large group of people want to be on one more than on the others. As long as there's a few people on every committee, we'll feel comfortable. We're always going to report back to the whole COAB anyway about approving any decisions. But as far as that larger group, that would be the same dysfunctionality that you face here as a large group. So there would be, no offense, I mean, but you'd have to get a way, a mechanism for everyone to have input, such as the email process, and then reporting back to everybody and then doing it again, an iterative process of trying to reach consensus.
Okay. Christy?
Yeah, and just because we haven't adopted the bylaws, I was hoping to get clarification on I want to emphasize the importance on alternates being a part of, a fully recognized part of members of subcommittees, and that be instituted in the bylaws. And so if that's the case, then I want to just be clear that they can determine their preferences. Is that the case?
That's the case.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah, and in our bylaws, at least I incorporated one of those suggestions in the draft that I circulated, that alternates would be eligible to serve in the subcommittees along with members of the general public, which is a custom when you have people who have interest and expertise in things that we're doing. So yes.
So for the more popular ones, so Game of Thrones is supposed to start April 12th. Apparently, maybe it starts earlier on the more popular subcommittees.
But did you?
So we've been presented with a list of 4 potential subcommittees where we might have feedback that here's an additional subcommittee I really think we need.
Yep.
How would you like to handle
Send
that?
it to the COCL.
Okay, so we'll have that opportunity
Yep.
to do that.
Send it to the
Excellent.
COCL.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Tom, you should put up the schedule thing. We wanted to talk to you about a schedule for some of this stuff because, and then there's going to be an open comment period, right? So we want to
Yeah.
rush through this. This is the last.
Well, you don't have to write.
Well, this
yeah,
is
I
kind
guess.
of important.
Yeah.
We're proposing this as a schedule.
there's a hard
help me out,
copy.
Amy, the meetings in dark are the regular monthly COAB meetings?
The hard copy, everyone has a hard
Oh,
copy
a hard copy
that
of this,
explains
okay.
those.
And the ones with the double asterisks are the actual quarterly open town hall meetings where you guys are gonna encourage more people to come, and we present the quarterly report, which you will have, I think, before then.
Right.
A week or two before. They tend to be on Thursdays. It just so happens that it's hard for us to come on a Monday to from Chicago to here because of our schedules right now until May when things change. We're both teaching large classes and stuff that meet on Mondays and Wednesdays. So we're hoping you guys can live with that because that way we can be here too. And, but that's a plan that goes, now that does not include the subcommittees. I just realized that.
We'll have to work out our subcommittee schedules as we go.
On your own. Yeah,
Yeah.
each group may
Yeah.
have a different
Yeah.
kind of schedule.
I think it's important to also say, and I'll get to Rochelle, that we're not going to be meeting here all the time, that our locations will move around. This was what we could do with the time frame that we were working with. But they will move around and be in different locations, and some will be more convenient to you than this perhaps, and others perhaps not. But we do need to, we should probably get feedback, but we really need to set this schedule, and it's done in accordance with the settlement agreement. Because the settlement agreement requires these quarterly meetings, and then we have the 2 hours, we have to have meetings during the month, once a month. And so this is I think, a good approximation of how we should do our business. Rochelle?
I have an issue with the April 2nd meeting, which is a public town hall meeting. And the date is the night before a weekend of religious holidays for both Christians and Jews. And I know personally I will not be here, and I don't know if other people have an issue with that date.
Could you email the COCO so we can preserve that and figure out what to do? But I think there's a community, the survey requirement and the meeting requirements put us on the 2nd
It
of
was
April.
basically, we have to have 2 public town hall meetings within the first 90 days. So one of them is the quarterly meeting that can also be the town hall meeting, and we needed one additional meeting.
Well, we'll send
Yeah.
that to us and we'll try to work that out.
Yeah.
I
Thank
see.
you.
Okay. That's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday, Good
So
Friday's.
what else would be excluded around that time period? The 3rd as well? Let's see.
Right.
So if you made it earlier, like on the 1st.
Okay. Okay.
I know
Okay.
you have a problem getting here, but.
Yeah. Well, we don't, yeah.
Well, we'll try to
Okay,
accommodate
we'll
and
do
work
what
out
we
best
can.
we can. Emmanuel, did you have your gavel up?
Yeah, just want to make a comment really quick. Just say that I don't know if it belongs in the functions or the bylaws somewhere, but just want to go on record and just have us also keep in mind that folks who are being released from incarceration also have mental illnesses, other additional barriers that may be 4 and 5 times higher than the regular population of people. And make sure that, I don't know exactly where it would go, but I did just want to get it out there and just continue to just reiterate that every time I come to make sure that we get that point in there, because at least 90% people get released and they have additional barriers on top of being a felon, on top of being having fines and fees to pay, and their interaction with the police may be greater because they're on parole and probation. So that also plays a big part in the COAB and reducing recidivism and everything with juvenile justice to adults. So just wanted to make that statement.
Thank
It's
you.
a really good point.
V?
Did you say 90%, Emmanuel, have mental illness that are receiving?
At least 90% are released, and it may be more, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least out of that, I know there are a high percentage of people who come out with additional mental illnesses, lack of medication, and so on and so forth, and
Yeah.
I didn't.
lack of healthcare services, so.
So, one more thing, I'm not at all trying to diminish in any way, I'm actually trying to make it work in terms of schedule. But what about Skyping? Would that, I mean, would that work for you all, or is it,
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
you know, I mean, I'm just trying to,
We might be able to plan and get a facility and that, so that we can undertake that kind of modern meeting.
Especially on the subcommittees, I mean, we may have to do that, because that group needs to meet, you know, more frequently, yeah.
Rabbi?
Is there a proposed time for these dates?
It's up to you guys, 6 o'clock, or?
I think we'll try to keep on our schedule of 6 o'clock. It doesn't say that, but that's generally what seemed to work. Everyone has jobs. So if you have feedback about that and want to suggest anything else, you could email the Corey, you had your gavel up?
Yeah, I feel like it's worth mentioning that on the days, particularly on the town hall days, that we need to, as a principal, find a space that's closer to downtown.
Okay.
On the Max line.
Great suggestion.
It's more than just a bit of convenience. It's actually an accessibility issue for lots of folks, and it's also a class issue because most people. I'm lucky enough to have a partner we can afford a car, but I spent an hour and 15 minutes driving here today, and for a lot of people who need to be involved in this process, that was just kind of ignored when this space was chosen. Well, I shouldn't say it was ignored, but it was highly underestimated about what impact that has, not only on the current COAB, but also folks who want to attend. So I would really strongly suggest that be made a priority at the top of the list of things that need to get done, particularly for the quarterly meetings, but I would like to see that starting immediately, that we start looking for a closer space, or at least begin talking about that.
Thank you, Corey. I think that's an excellent comment. And I've just been handed a note.
10
This is an
minutes.
important one, too. Please ask if members want to be fed each time. But-
Right. However.
Okay, there seemed to be a majority vote or consensus on that.
We wanna be
Okay.
mindful of the
Budget's limited, but we'll try to get this thing working, so, okay?
I just wanted to piggyback off of Mr. Murphy's thing about closer to something or another. I come from Oregon City and I'm taking public transportation, so I don't understand the necessity for being in a specific centralized. Aren't we centralized?
Well, just to clarify, like, for example, if people with mobility issues want to come, TriMet, it's harder for them to get to outlying areas using TriMet, even if
Oh,
they
I
use
know.
Lyft. And as you know, and then also I think, I understand that this is an immediate space, but I think we also have to think about geographically where people are. And I think that communities that are affected, particularly people who are receiving mental health services, drug counseling services, and after incarceration services are, I believe, based on my somewhat expansive knowledge, but not of everything, but a lot of those core services are centralized downtown because of the Max line. So that was the impetus for my statement.
They're actually East County.
Amy has been very dutifully taking the minutes, the notes of what's been, she'll circulate those to all of us, so that will trigger what we've been talking about and make sure that we're all on the same page with this. Okay, all right. I'd like to move to our public comment. We've got 12 minutes. We have 6 people. We divide that time. Mae Wilson is first.
Citizen Review Committee. I wanted to advocate for us to be written in as one of the community groups that you consider liaison with and do your bylaws. We are an 11-member committee. We've been the Citizen Oversight Committee since 2001. We hear complaints that citizens express when they disagree with the findings of the Police Bureau regarding their complaints. We also can make policy recommendations. And we have a historical knowledge of a lot of the stuff that you want to focus on. We're also written into the DOJ agreement as one of the integral parts that we're trying to look at when we're talking about citizen oversight. So you talk about a lot of different community groups in here that I think are really important, and I just believe the CRC should be one of them as well. Thank you.
Dan Handelman.
Hi, I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I know some of you, but not all of you. I'm very glad to see this getting off the ground. People have asked us why we didn't want to serve on the committee. It's because we have a lot of concerns that the settlement agreement doesn't go far enough. And we have an 11-point essay that we read at the court that you can look up online if you want to find out more about our concerns. But I'm hearing something that's very encouraging, which is that people are open to hearing stuff that's not in the settlement agreement. And I hope that you stick to that as you move forward. And I hope that, I also want to explain that we, for many years, were reluctant to having the DOJ come to town because we didn't want to end up in a position where the federal government was telling us what to do in our local police department, bureau in this case, but that happened in other cities. And the fact that we're part of this experiment where they're letting the community be part of the settlement makes us feel a lot better as a group institutionally about how things are moving forward. In terms of the subcommittees, I hope you all come up with a 5th subcommittee because it breaks down more evenly, 15 people in 5 groups, you know, it just makes more sense. One of the suggestions I have is that even though there's policies involved in some of the subcommittees, there's directives that the Portland Police are posting every month because of the settlement agreement. They started doing it a year ago before you were even in a twinkle in the settlement agreement's eye. And they've already made changes to like the use of force policies and a lot of policies. And it'd be good to have people looking at those, even the ones that don't fall in other categories. Hopefully, and I didn't hear this. I'm not sure if it's because the sound gets lost in this room. If the subcommittees are bringing their reviews of like the community survey back to the whole group for a vote before it's approved?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good, because that's not in the bylaws that subcommittees can't make decisions for the whole group. And I just hope that you look at when you're looking at interacting with other groups like the CRC, look at what nights they meet and try not to set your big public hearings on those nights. For instance, the first Wednesday of the month, April 1st, would be a conflict. So take a look at those schedules too when you're scheduling your meetings. Thank you.
G. Price?
Emmanuel, did you sign up to make a public comment?
Oh, yeah.
So you made it.
Well, I've just whispered. Well, it's more like it is a comment, but I was like, do I raise it? So anyway, Mr. Rosenbaum, Miss Amy, and Tom, is it?
Yes.
As we progress and we move forward, are we able to glean from you guys some of the things that you guys have worked with and seen in Chicago, being that they do have a higher homicide rate, maybe more interactions with police officers and whatnot? Can we glean that from you and you give us some suggestions on what you think Portland should do? Because we're not Chicago, we're not DC, we're not Baltimore, Maryland, but we can get there pretty fast. And even though there's a big shift there's a difference between, we may have less black people here, but higher incidents, or they may have more black and Latino people there. What can we get, or are we able to ask you guys, or do you guys volunteer it willingly? Or we have to make that request to get some of that information. Yeah, that was my comment.
Asmuth?
PolicePDX.com. First, I apologize for ruffling any feathers of officers who are here present, but I do think that on top of a failure on police use of force policies, from what I've seen filming officers, they should also get failures on policies, training, and recruitment. Many of the policies that are in place currently lead to the use of force escalations and the training as well. And use of force doesn't have to be physical. You know, a perfect example is this thing they call sweeps, which just its term sweeps is very disingenuous to the action that's occurring, because what they do is they literally are sweeping homeless people off the sidewalks in the early crack of dawn. And when this happens, sometimes the homeless person that is being swept, just like a piece of lint or you would sweep your kitchen floor, they actually have their stuff confiscated. and then it's removed to a place that's way off Barber Boulevard. When you do that, when the police are doing this, instituting this insane, dehumanizing policy, they kill people. You know, there's actually been an Oregonian article that broke my heart. I read this a couple days ago about a gentleman named Alvin Smith. He was swept out from underneath the bridge he was staying at. The police confiscated his tent, and he died from hypothermia 4 days later. So we can't have our police officers killing people with their policies. This needs to get addressed. And on top of that, strongly recommend. I see profiling all the time when I'm filming officers. It happens often. And I'm not just talking about racial profiling. I'm also talking about homeless profiling, felon profiling. These things do happen. They need to stop. We need to take a stand, and we need to explain to the officers, you know, we are the ones paying you to protect us. You're not protecting us when you are having these kind of confrontations with people and escalating them and then robbing them of their humanity, their dignity, and ultimately their lives. So I would highly recommend that a third part of this, interactions with people who are perceived by officers to be suffering a mental health crisis, homeless, or felons. I think to add those two factions of community and evaluate how these policies are being implemented on the street is a very important, crucial thing that's going to save lives and restore the dignity of the police force.
Thank you, Mr. Asmuth. Charles Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thanks especially to the volunteer COAB members, and also thanks to many citizens who were in a 4-hour hearing Thursday night, as we tried to get the city to understand that we do not need to set 2 more police officers liaisoning with the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, is a waste of police resources. There's a problem with this whole settlement agreement in that we don't need to be feeding the police bureau. We need to be starving the police bureau. It didn't need $26 million more. So I want to encourage everyone that's in this room as a COAB member and involved citizens to think about the fact that crime is going down and police budgets can go the same direction. We also have somewhat of the answer right here in this room. We talked at the beginning about bylaws and language. And we hear crazy phrases in the news all the time, like Police Commissioner Bill Bratton in New York and Police Commissioner here. The citizens should control the police through a real police commission. This COAB is a short-term existing body during a legal settlement, but it should grow to become the Citizens Police Commission that has authority over the contract of the Portland Police Bureau, not entrusting it to one of the 5 commissioners at City Hall or the 5 commissioners there. So although you have a specific legal function to help implement this agreement, I encourage you all to grow your networks and to grow community control of the police and help the police become more like the people we want to be in the community, less militarized, less body armor, greater safety in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne Hardesty.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight, and I want to say I am so happy so far with the work of the COAB. Just from sitting here tonight, it's clear that you're all committed to this effort, and I thank you for the time that you're going to volunteer over the next few years. A couple of points I wanted to make as I reviewed the bylaws. You will spend an awful lot of time talking to police-created advisory committees, and it seems overboard that you're meeting with like the Training Advisory Committee, the African American Advisory Committee, this advisory committee, that advisory committee, and most of those committees were put in place. They had to be police approved. They had to sign a confidentiality agreement, and they had to go through a background check. And so it's not really the public that you say you want to talk to if you're spending all your time talking to police-approved committees. And so I would recommend that you put all those police-approved committees in a room and have one meeting with them. And then you can ask them all the questions you need to ask them. Because the answers you're going to get is going to be from the public and not from those police-created advisory committees. The other thing I want to share with you is that this community has no trust in Portland State University to do a evaluation or an investigation about community concerns about Portland Place. They have had an incestuous relationship for a long, long time. And just before this group came together,
our last police chief went out and secretly had Brian do a survey that he tried to present to the city council as the COAB. He had to have it done before the COAB was in place. And it was because of community members like myself who went to the city council meeting and stopped them from signing a 3-year contract with Brian to do this survey. He'd already developed it. It's already on the Police Bureau's website. It is not a community survey. It is not the kind of questions that this community would be asking if we were conducting a survey.
Okay.
We have no trust in him. Find someone else. There are other universities that would be willing to do the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
It's 8 o'clock. Thank you. You did? I'm sorry, Sam, we have one more. Okay, one more, very quickly, because we're going to quit at 8.
Yeah, sorry, I somehow didn't sign up.
Okay.
I just want to introduce myself. My name's Sam Sachs. I'm a Human Rights Commissioner for the City of Portland. I'm also the Chair of the Community Police Relations Committee, the committee you'll be doing a lot of work with. So my email is thenohateZone@yahoo.com. If you'd like to get a hold of me or contact me, I have cards. But I just want to introduce myself. We'll be working together collaboratively over the next few years, and that's it.
Thank you. Well, last thing, let's thank our interpreters for their excellent job.
Unnecessary, thank you, but it's our jobs. And
Thank
so
you.
we're just one of you as well, just
Thank
like
you.
everybody else.
Thank you. We're adjourned.